Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Maundy Thursday, and probably the strangest Maundy Thursday I've had uh, as a minister, anyway. Not that I'm alluding to anything else. When you're a minister, every Maundy Thursday's, kind of similar. This is a big day of the year. And I'm sitting at home in one of the most relaxing weeks of my career, which is unusual for Holy Week. Um, Having just watched a snowstorm out my front window when I thought that was well over, and sort of celebrating Maundy Thursday online from my kitchen table. It's a strange day. I want to invite you to do two things before we get too far into the video. One is to read John 13, the whole chapter. The second is to go make yourself a snack and make yourself something nice. Don't just come back with a muffin or a bag of chips or something. You know, make something that you would, maybe if someone popped by your house and you wanted to put a little snack out, maybe do something that you would like that. Just something that you'll enjoy and make a bit of an event. So, Maundy Thursday is an interesting day. It's a day that's all about community, community with each other and community with God. In light of the highest highs, lowest lows, vulnerabilities, and possibilities of this world. The disciples and Jesus had just come into this place in Jerusalem. They're sharing a room together, and they're having this big celebration dinner right after. Well, not right after. A couple of days after the triumphal entry. This was the height of their ministry. They're at their highest popularity. Thousands of people were celebrating as they came into Jerusalem, and they feel like they've arrived. It's a celebratory dinner. Jesus would have known that things weren't what they seemed, but nobody else realized this. And so, on the one hand, in one sense, they're sharing dinner, a very friendly, celebratory, feast type dinner with God incarnate. That's huge in itself. Imagine sitting with the creator of life, the universe, and everything around your kitchen table. Secondly, they're sitting at that table celebrating with the person that would betray Jesus and would enable Jesus' people, Jesus' followers, and Jesus' government to betray him. So on the one hand, we've got the highest highs of friendship and love and community that are being celebrated with the creator of life, the universe, and everything. That's just tremendous. On the other hand, we have betrayal and complete betrayal by those closest to Jesus. So we've got the highest heights of humanity and the lowest lows of humanity all at this table. It is representative of the human experience. We live and we die, we do good and we do bad. We're capable of great good and we're capable of great bad. And it's all encompassed at this table that God wants to be at, that God is celebrating being at. And then Jesus ties a towel around his waist and starts washing his disciples' feet. We still don't like feet to this day. I've never done a foot washing ceremony myself. And the reason for that is anytime I bring it up, everybody goes, please don't. Just please don't. We don't want people touching our feet. We don't want to touch each other's feet. And, not everybody's got the best foot hygiene. It's something we're still squeamish about. Yet we have fairly technologically advanced socks and shoes. We bathe most days, if not every day. Um, we don't walk the way we used to. We don't have, dirt streets with animals and open sewage with open shoes. Um, yeah, their feet were pretty disgusting. And so, on this backdrop of the highest heights and lowest lows of what humanity has to offer, Jesus models leadership by washing their feet. And I take two things from this. One is the very traditional servant leader thing of Christianity. And I think that servant leader idea is tremendously important, particularly to me. We don't we don't lead through sort of power and force. We lead as Christians through service. And I know that not all Christians do that, but life is complicated. But the other side of it is just vulnerability. Jesus is being so vulnerable here, and he's foreshadowing how vulnerable he has to be. And I always come back to the fact that Jesus shows us how to make change through vulnerability. I forget whether it was yesterday or the day before, I think it was the day before, about how when we try to make change, we often, we want the pendulum to stop in the middle. But when we try to make change, we do so by force, usually. And that makes the pendulum swing the other way, and then it swings back and forth and back. And it's hard to get that pendulum to stop. Jesus showed us the way to make it move without swinging. And that is basically to absorb the conflict. That's what he did on the cross. He took a very bad situation and absorbed it to great sacrifice for himself. He showed us how to make change through vulnerability. And I want you to just think about for a minute. If everybody was willing to give up everything that made them feel safe, so if you were willing to give up your house and your money, and imagine not putting money away for retirement, or only doing volunteer work and not working for a paycheck. If we were all willing to do that, if there's just a few of us that were willing to do that, we'd put ourselves at great risk and probably meet with the same end that Jesus did. But imagine if every single person in the world did that. That's the dream. You would not have to worry about putting food on the table, because you could just assume that some neighbor was going to show up with food. So because, you're worrying about this neighbor, you're giving all your food to that neighbor because you know that this neighbor is going to bring you. Like, imagine that kind of world. That's what Jesus is. That's the message of Jesus. And Jesus shows that in this action of washing his disciples' feet. He shows how you lead through service and how you lead through vulnerability. All these things are wrapped up in this meal, and that's why communion is so important. Our modern communion service is based on practicality and 1,500 years of history. At one point, the church was so anxious because for 1,500 years, the whole church believed that the body and the bread and the wine was the actual body and blood of Christ. And it created a tremendous amount of anxiety around things like crumbs and spills and whether people actually understood and things like that, to the point where at one time, laity weren't allowed to have communion. They watched the priest do it. And everybody kind of believes different things about communion now, so it's complicated, and I don't want to get too deep into that. But when you've got that level of anxiety around communion, of course you're going to start doing practical things to mitigate it. And that became our history and what we knew of communion. And then after that, the other concern is if you are going to do communion for, 250 people, because churches until very recently were generally pretty big. And if you weren't a big church, you wanted to be a big church, so you did things like the big churches did. How do you serve a meal, a ceremonial, liturgical meal, to say 250 people on a regular basis? You can't really do it. So, the bread, the little squares of bread and the wine, that became a symbol, and just an easy symbol for distribution in large groups. But this, if we were together physically around my kitchen table right now, like I am in the video, that would be what this is symbolizing. But with God and with all these other things we've talked about around this table. So it's, we don't have to do the little squares of bread and the wine and all the words, and it's more than that. It's about presence. It's about God being here and about all these symbols. So, communion and community is a strange and complicated thing. And I want to just end. Grace asked me this morning over breakfast. She said, "What would you do if this were 30 years ago and you weren't on the internet? Like, as a minister, what would my life look like?" And I was thinking about it. I think I'd spend a lot of time on the phone, maybe. I honestly don't know what I'd be doing, because I can't visit, can't do meetings, can't preach, can't... my life right now is revolving around the internet, which I think is just tremendously interesting. And I'm kind of open to that. I'm an online community guy. I think that's fine. And I think, in some cases it even opens up some really neat possibilities. But I want you to think about the different ways that we can be in community today. Like, the fact that we can do this, I think is really interesting. I'm 33 years old. I straddle the divide between sort of the world with what they call Internet 2.0. I think it's like, they say 1998 or something is when the internet sort of became something else. There's early internet, and then there's what we know today. So I sort of straddle that divide. And I remember what life was like when there was no smartphones and internet was dial-up and computers were slow, and very, not that many people actually had them. And I also am excited about the possibilities of, social media and stuff like that, and all the possibilities that the internet brings. And I guess I wonder what ways we can express this community, both with each other and with God, in that Last Supper kind of way, with the internet and with online community, given that it's, the internet and telephone are kind of our only options right now. So how can we be in community with God and be in community with each other? I want you to just sort of munch on your snacks and think about that. Invite God in to the place where you are, and invite, the people that you're with in your house maybe. And if you know someone who's living alone, please call them. This would be a tremendously lonely time if you lived alone. And if you are someone who lives alone, don't hesitate to call someone. I think sometimes we don't like to call people because, we think, well, if they're not calling us, then they must be busy or not thinking about us. And that's not my experience. It's just lives are busy and things happen. And, I think a lot about my friends, but it might be, I might think about my friend at midnight when you can't phone, So, just because you haven't heard from someone doesn't mean they don't want hear from you, So call someone as you finish your snack and finish your meal, and just share this time with them. Amen.